the nicest people, and they're smart at listening and then making the invisible, connecting the invisible dots, which is another skill that we do in Silicon Valley very well. It's part of the framework, part of the mindset of Silicon Valley is that everyone's trying to help everyone else. So we talk a lot, we share a lot of information. We share our struggles, we share our successes, we share our puzzles and challenges. And then because we share it so much, then everyone starts to get an idea, okay, this person needs this help, and I know someone who can help them with this. And there's a lot of informal networks that say, hey, let me introduce you to someone who can help you. And this happens thousands of times a day in Silicon Valley. And if it doesn't happen in Germany, this is one of those things that you don't write about. It's hard to study. There won't be a textbook written about it, but it's just changing the mindset a little bit where you're willing to open up more about what you're working on. That there are very little secrets, and then everyone starts to understand what's the ecosystem like, what's the landscape, and then everyone can start making some connecting those invisible dots. Yes?
Two very simple questions. How old are you meanwhile?
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 35. And what is the
achievements? And the other question, how much do the companies pay per desk at market, more or less?
Okay, so the companies that are well funded pay $700 a desk. The companies that are not so well funded pay $500 a desk. And there are a few teams that we're not charging anything yet, but we want to help them get funding so that they can pay.
And you pick, it's by invitation only?
It's by invitation only. Yes.
What are your criteria? Obviously, companies are very young, so there's still a product risk and a business model risk and a scaling risk for sure. How do you?
Well,
who's doing it?
We're very early stage, right? So most of these companies have 2 or 3 co-founders, very small teams, very early. They have an idea. They might have a prototype, but what we do, the way I pick is primarily on the team, the people. We have a very strict no asshole rule, right? It's very, very strict.
So what happens?
Well, we haven't had that, except for maybe like we've asked one team to leave, but for the most part, everybody's been amazing.
Okay.
So the one team was able to fool us, and it's easy to fool me, but it's hard to fool Manana. It's hard to fool Brian. It's easy to fool me, but she has a really good judgment of character. She's spot on. I think female intuition is much better at that. And then, and so it's primarily team, right? Because it's too early to go on anything else. So it's primarily team. But you'll find that in Silicon Valley, most of the best investors approach investing that very same way. It's all about the team. And then secondary is, well, what's the uniqueness, the novelty of the idea? Is it truly something that we haven't seen before, or it has like at least a very interesting twist on an old idea? So that's it. It's very simple. And that's what we found when we had our 3 IPOs, was just we bet on the people. And this is one of those things that I think other coaches find hard to do, because you want to be precise. You want to mitigate all your risks. You want to say, okay, let's look at the business plan. Let's look at their technology. How many patents do they have? And the investor is trying to fool himself to say, I've accounted for all the risks and minimized all the risks, and now I'll make an investment. But if you just say, these guys are smart enough, and they'll figure it out, and the idea is just unique enough, and they'll figure it out, and they'll adjust the idea as the market gives them new information, then that's been the more successful way to invest. Yes?
I have a question. Maybe you can understand how often you paid your fund? What was the multiple on the fund?
How often what?
What was the multiple on the fund that you paid back to your investors?
Oh, so it was. So I don't have the latest figures, but just it was a $20 million fund, and we had $3 billion IPOs. So it's far in excess of 10x. Yeah, it's far in excess of 10x. Now, if someone gave us $200 million, we would have been a complete failure, right? Because it's much harder to invest $200 million and make it all return. But we got very lucky, and the investors were smart enough to just say, here's 20. If they gave us 200, we would have been a complete failure. They gave us 20, and we got very lucky.
Yeah.
Well, we could find the best students in Germany. What's the top university there?
It's a few.
Everyone's arguing.
Two in Munich, yes.
So we'll take some of the best from everyone, and we'll start the first student-run fund in Germany. And you would be amazed, because if you're older, are you necessarily going to be able to see the potential for Twitter, right? If you're an older investor, you're not going to see that. It's going to hit you by surprise. It will blindside you. You will not see it. You cannot anticipate that. Will you see would you see Airbnb being able to succeed here? If you've used Airbnb, you can use Airbnb in Germany. You would not see that. So if you have older investors, they're not going to recognize that potential. So it's always good to have young blood as part of the fund. Yes.
If you could teach German VCs one thing about investing, what would that be?
I think we've been talking about it a lot already. It's being willing to make decisions on imperfect information, incomplete information. So not being able to fully quantify the risk, and just saying the risk mitigation is how smart and how good and how driven and how nice and how tough that team is. That's like the best mitigator of risk.
Perfect.
So,
Yes. Last one.
I just wondering out loud whether it's something a little bit different about the investors. I mean, I run the LMU Entrepreneurship Center incubator. We had 90 companies come out. We don't take equity. We don't charge them. We don't make them any promises or anything like that. We had one 25 million euro exit. One.
Congratulations.
Well, that's one.
Yeah.
And the others are kind of like, they get 50,000 but they don't turn into billion. And I just wonder whether it's not the investor atmosphere that's around that's more important, not more important, but there's some other piece of the sauce, because 90 companies at a university, you would think you would have more.
It's partially the investor thing, but I think this is a great question. It's very important, but it's also a function of time. So when you say 1 out of 90, I'm afraid and I'm concerned that the temptation is to stop, and I don't want you to lose your support.
35% get funded. They get 50,000, 25,000,
Sure.
or 100,000.
Yeah.
Exits.
Right. So my biggest fear is that